Alright guys, what's up? So I broke my camera, so we're taking this on my iPhone 6, and a lot of questions about what engine is going in, and it is a 4.4 V8 out of a 540i with a matching 6-speed M5 transmission. It makes just under 300 horsepower, pre-chipped. Once I chip it, it should be about 316 or so. For a car that I can pick up by hand, I think that is going to be very interesting in terms of power to weight ratio. So that's the motor that's going in it. We actually have a second one from a parts car that I bought that's sitting outside. I pulled this out yesterday. 98 5 Series 540i with a 6-speed and the V8 that we need. So I bought it all, got it for exceptionally cheap. So we're going to be using that engine. That's going to be our spare engine. That's going to be our new engine. And we're going to make horsepower. So we got a lot of stuff left to do. I still got to plumb the brakes. I got to do coolant. I got to show you guys the radiator that we got for such a good deal. We got to do front clip, rear clip, interior bits. We got to do a whole whack of wiring. We got to wire in a EWS system. That's the anti-theft for BMW. I'm going to try and get around that because I got a 740 harness that actually has the X20 connector. So I'm going to try and see if I can jump the fuse box between the motor and do a little something there to try and get around that. If not, I have the key, the box, and the ECU. I don't know if it's been damaged. It was in the trunk of the car that I bought, and it was like this. So I'm assuming that the previous owner did something to it. I don't know what, but we're going to find out whether or not it works. And if it does, great. If not, I don't really care. I'll figure something out, because that's what you do when you want to go drifting. You just make it work, because race car. So we're going to get cracking on this thing, and the one on the floor, I also got to clean up a little bit because it is an absolute mess in here, and don't mind that box in the corner because I am going to hide that, and you will see that later. So, yeah, let's get started. Alright guys, so this is the engine that we're going to be using. It's a 4.4 V8 out of a 540i, 1998, with a 6-speed transmission. A couple things you guys haven't seen since we last took up with these videos before I smashed my camera. My own stupidity. We've got the engine bay painted. It's a gloss black with a gold fleck in it. I think it looks pretty sweet. I did the vents and some other stuff. We did a small rad support underneath, just a tubular frame style. We're going to do two J-hook style clamps to hold the radiator down. I'll show you guys the rad that we got after this. It's actually pretty funny how that actually works out. You guys are going to laugh at that. The engine mounts are Ipitech. For anybody who is doing this swap, apart from me, because this has been done before, it's not a new thing. There's just a lot of different ways to do it. This is an M62 B44, not an M60. So we got an extra 0.4 displacement with an extra rat's nest of wiring to do, but that's okay because it's going to be sick. And I do not want to put the M60 harness on this thing because that seems to be what everybody wants to do and just chintz out and not actually find a way to make this work without having to do that, which there is totally a way to do it. You just got to figure it out. One of the things the internet told me to do, and I said no, and I did it on my own, was you actually have to notch the oil pan. You have to send the oil pan out or do it yourself. If you have a TIG machine, you can do aluminum, and then, you know, by all means go ahead, but you do not have to actually notch the oil pan. What happens is the rack actually sat higher than this, and then it sits on the bottom of the oil pan, and then it doesn't allow you to actually bolt in your motor mounts. It sits up about a ½ inch away, and then it'll just kind of teeter-totter between the two. What I did was I cut off my rack locations, lowered them, re-bolted them on, and then bolted that down, and everything seems to fit pretty good, and I got good oil pan clearance. You can see it in there. So if you have this car and this engine and you want to do that stuff and you don't want to send out your oil pan to get modified for $1 million from Garagistics or any of those companies, just drop the rack down like ½ inch. You'll be fine. You still have to modify the steering location anyway, so you might as well just do that. It saves you a headache, saves you a trip to a machine shop or wherever you guys would get your stuff done. And it's just one less thing to pay for. Makes the swap go by a lot easier. You're already welding a bunch of stuff in this car anyways. You might as well, you know, take the extra 5 minutes and just lower it down, drill 2 holes, and away you go, right? So apart from that, I'll show you guys the shifter. Alright guys, so this is a shifter that I wanted to show you guys real quick before I pull this whole gearbox back out. This is a Ford T5 shifter out of a Mustang Fox body, 5 liter. If any of you guys know those transmissions, that this whole unit itself actually bolts to the transmission and then this just comes up to the floor and then, you know, drift. So what I did was I bought this unit and then I took the E39 shifter linkage and I cut the post off the bottom, welded it to the bottom of this one, shortened my transmission linkage accordingly to fit between the throw of the unit from neutral to, you know, all the other gears. Now this isn't bolted down right now, that's why it's like super wiggly. These nuts aren't actually attached, I can pull it up by hand. The reason I'm not doing that is because there's no need to bolt this down yet, because I still have to take the engine and gearbox out a bunch of times. So if I bolt this down, it would just make everything a headache, because the linkage will actually hit the bottom of the guibo or gubo or whatever the hell it's called, the rubber flex disc for the drive shaft, and then it just always gets caught up and then the shifter starts getting pulled forwards and it's just absolute nightmare. So anywho, what I'm going to show you guys is this actually is somewhat of like a dog box setup now, which is a bit of a far-fetched saying, but however, if you've ever driven a BMW, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, because it's like rowing a boat. My old E30 drift car, the bushings were shot, and literally I would be in like first or second, and I could just go like in my lap on a cross. It was just something else. But yeah, we got first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and then reverse. Now you'll hear it clicking a lot, and like I said, that's because this isn't actually bolted down, so when I pull it around I can move it. I also have to weld on this extension because this unit by itself is just way too low. Because if you're driving, you have to come down here, third, come back up. It's just an absolute nightmare. So put this extension on, put on a nice you know, grip handle or something, and then shift, grab it, shift, grab it. Just super easy. So there's that. We're gonna go pull the engine gearbox back out, and then we're gonna keep on cracking. And I've never seen anybody actually do this before, so if anybody wants to try this idea on their factory M20 with 5-speed gearbox, please let me know in the comments or send me a message or whatever. Now, I'll be more than happy to walk you guys through how to do this. Or you can hit me up on Instagram. It's at RonanAbide. Guys, so the engine's out. This is the beast in its entirety. There's a second one behind that rug that we're going to be using in a minute. Pretty much all I got to do is I just got to take off the 2 motor mounts, switch everything around, put it on that one, put the transmission onto that car, or that engine, sorry, I put it in the car. This is what I was saying about the rack location. Just cut the tabs off because these usually sit up here, lower them, and then just install a second set on the bottom, and it brings the rack, as you can see, just below where you need it, and that allows the engine to not actually crush the rack when you put it in the car. Like I said, the only thing you have to modify, which you already do have to modify, are these. These knuckles are actually off a Honda Civic, a 2000 Honda Civic. Just go to 2 cars, take them both off. The secondary posts, I just got to have to lengthen this because I moved the rack down a little bit, but that's alright. I was going to change that design anyways because I didn't like it. I'm going to do just a single bolt on the bottom and then weld the top 2, weld the bottom to the rack, and then that way I have removability if I ever get into an accident or somehow I damage the rack to the point where I can't use it anymore. So, another thing you gotta have to do if you're doing this swap at home, you gotta bash that back. Originally, if you can kind of see it here a little bit, where that lip is on the edge. This used to sit about here. So let's push it back about a ½ inch, and then everything will fit up nice and tidy, which is what you want. So we got all that stuff out. Got the transmission crossmember, it's kind of hanging on the ground there. I gotta modify that. I gotta cut it up. So don't worry about that. So what we're gonna do is take this, put this in the corner over there, take this, pull it out from behind that rug, bolt it up, take the wiring harness off of it, because I'm in the current process of modifying it to the point where I can actually see where the heck everything is. And we'll set this aside for a rainy day or for a rod knock, and then yeah, we'll get to it. The piece that I had in here before became longer. So what I had to do was, when I dropped the rack down, I had to undo my bolts that I had attached. In the swap guide, it tells you like a whole bunch of websites you can go to, like Flaming River and all these other guys that'll sell these U-joints for about $1 million a piece. But I opted for a different route because I got the good old welder here. So what I did was, these are two 2000 Civic steering knuckles that are underneath the dash panel, right about here on the car. There's like a steering column, and then there's this little column piece, and then the spline comes out. The splines they're almost matching. They're not quite. It's like there's like an extra tooth or something in there, so you kind of gotta hammer them on. But because this is a track-only vehicle, I welded the top joint, welded the secondary joint with a plug weld in the middle, and then I bolted the bottom section, so if I ever have to actually take the rack off the car, then I have some part in this whole mechanism that is detachable. God forbid I break anything. And the bottom section, I can't really see it down here, this section is also welded directly to the rack. So when I take this piece off, it'll be that whole U-joint that'll actually detach from the vehicle, and then fix whatever needs fixing. Now, if you can remember back in the E46 coilover installation, we got the Volkswagen Corrado rotors machined at the same time we did the hubs for the E46 coilovers. Right now I just have the RX-7 4-pot caliper just zip tied into place, just so I can kind of get a rough idea of where we're supposed to be going with this. If you look in the back, you can actually see how close the holes are in terms of placement. So the bracket system is going to be super simple to make. Essentially, it's just going to be almost a straight piece of 1.5 inch flat steel all the way up, about 7.5 inches long. And it's going to go right between the bolt locations here, and the bottom section here and here. It's going to go on the back side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to weld a nut onto it and make sure that we keep that clearance between the back of the rotor and the bolt location, nice and tidy, and then everything should essentially fit. I got the rotor pretty much held in. I just got a pin in the brake pads just to kind of give me a general idea of how straight the rotor is going to be, but that's pretty much where it's going to sit in relation to everything else. Now, I don't know if the wheels are going to fit unless I need to get better offset wheels, or if I need to actually get a bigger spacer. It's not really a big issue. The wider it is, the bigger the track in the front, the better the handling will be, so I'm not too worried. But I think it looks pretty good, and it'll actually work out pretty good for the pedal set we have, because we can control front and rear bias. So we lock a little extra front brake in that'll actually push the car down, lift the back end, make it a little higher, and then when you pull the e-brake, it's just going to slide right out and really make for a good ride. So I'm going to go cut some plate and see if we can mock this up, and then we'll come back and start making some holes. Alright guys, so we got the bracket cut. I just used a small piece of plate that's sitting over there on the floor from an old skid plate I made for somebody. Pretty much what we had to do, the tie rod's off for now, that's why this has got some crazy angle going on. So pretty much what we had to do was, we cut a plate right here, 1.5 inches by 7.5 inches long, which was just enough to come out the bottom of the actual rotor. It sits pretty much flush with the edge. It's got good clearance from the rotor, which we're going to actually, these bolts that we're using right now, they're just random ones I found in my basket. What we're going to do is we're going to get this plate, we're going to make it straight, pretty much like flush against the back of the brake just like that. We're going to tack and weld nuts on the back of these holes to accept these kind of bolts, but you know, obviously a lot shorter in length. These ones are a little excessive for what we're doing here. And then yeah, that should mount the RX-7 brake to the E30 hub without, you know, ridiculous modifications, and we don't have to cut and weld anything for our hub. So, you know, in case we ever decide to get rid of the car, or we get a second chassis that's in better shape, if I crash or something, then I can just reuse everything, or, you know, get new coilovers, do the same general weld, and then just slap these brackets on, and then away I go. I got 4-pot front brakes right now. This piece right here, it's just a random rod I had. I still got to put the pins in with the sliders and stuff. And then if you go straight, it's an 11-inch wide disc as opposed to the factory 9-inch, I believe. So it's going to have a lot more braking force, and it's just going to be awesome. Paired up with those Willwood brakes, we got the front bias going on. Get a little extra front brake in, and then it's just going to be something else. So I'm going to get some nuts and bolts, going to weld that bracket on, bolt it all up, and then, you know, we're going to go from there with the plumbing the soft line, and that should be it. Alright, so we got the RX-7 brakes mounted to the E30 chassis. As you can see on the actual caliper itself, I had to actually buff down some excess material to make the wheels fit, but sadly they still didn't fit, and I really didn't want to run the risk of grinding down any more than they did. So what I did was I ordered a 1-inch spacer as opposed to the 3/4 inch, which is not really that big of a difference considering the size that we had already had on there for the wheels. So that should make everything clear perfectly. All I have to do is run the RX-7 soft line from that to the fittings that I had plumbed into the car. The Willwood set actually runs a inverted flare factory, so it's nice that the Japanese calipers also run the inverted flare, so it makes everything a lot easier. So I ran the lines to the T-fitting. T-fitting splits the fluid between the left and the right wheel, and then the front brakes are done, and then all I have to do is just run a line from the center section to the back, tee it out, and then that'll give me the 2 back sections for the rear wheels. And then the hydrant brake goes on a standalone with a reservoir pot as well, and then that should be it. The brakes should be done probably the next day or two. I'll film the back section when I do it. I haven't done it yet. I have to get the car up, and then we can start sticking this motor in and getting it going.